On Erev Shabbat, some say Vishamru between Shema and Shmona Esrei. And
Right.
the reason that we don't, or a lot of people don't, is because the Gra says that there shouldn't be an interruption between the Shema and Shmona Esrei. But isn't the Shmona Esrei for Ma'ariv itself, like we say Kaddish between the two?
Right.
The Shemona Esrei itself is like a minhag, and so it's not like a part of it.
Right. So let's yeah. Right.
Why is
right.
an
So
additional thing considered an interruption?
Right. So all of your information is correct. Let me just give a little background to all of this. We know that the Gemara tells us there's a chiyuv to connect geula litfila. Geula is the redemption, Goal Yisrael, to Shemona Esrei. And in the morning, this is absolutely very, very clear. You say, Baruch atah Hashem, Goal Yisrael. You immediately go into Shemona Esrei. You have to connect the concept of redemption to the concept of tefillah. And the Gemara says, if you're somech geula litfila, there's all sorts of good brachos that are going to happen to you, etc. Now the question becomes, is there a chiyuv to be somech geula litfila by Ma'ariv? Now, on one hand, you are correct that the whole idea of davening Ma'ariv, meaning unlike Kriya Shema, which is doraisa, davening Ma'ariv is technically a rishus, we paskin, meaning technically it was optional, technically it was not a chayva. Nevertheless, the halacha still says that if you daven Ma'ariv, even though you didn't have to, you're supposed to be somech geula litfila. Now, the Gemara itself asks the kasha, how can you say, this is Rabbi Shua ben Levi's statement, who is a ben olam haba? Zeh ha-soimech geula litfila ba'arvis. He says. So the Gemara itself asks the kasha, how can that be? After Goal Yisrael, we have the bracha of Hashkivenu, Shomer Amo Yisrael La'at. Why isn't that a hefsek between geula litfila? That's the Gemara itself asks. The Gemara's answer is that just like Hashem Savasai Tiftach, right, is not considered an interruption between geula and tefillah because that's an extension of Shemona Esrei, Hashkivenu is an extension of geula. So Hashem Savasai Tiftach is tefillah arichta, and Hashkivenu is geula arichta. So that's the Gemara's answer. Now the question is, the Gemara's answer is incomplete. Because even if the Gemara's teretz is that Hashkivenu is not, is geula, but what about Chatzi Kaddish, right? What about Chatzi Kaddish? The Chatzi Kaddish itself is a hefsek between geula and tefillah. You certainly don't say a Chatzi Kaddish, right, in the morning. So here the Gra says the following. The Gra actually learns that the Chachamim wanted to show that Ma'ariv is a rishus. And the way they showed Ma'ariv is a rishus is by inserting a Kaddish between geula and tefillah. But it's not a complete interruption because Kaddish itself is about geula. So they wanted to make some hefsek to differentiate it from Shachris. In Shachris, there is no hefsek at all between geula and tefillah. In Arvis, there is what you might call a quasi-hefsek, and Kaddish is called a quasi-hefsek because in reality you could also call it a geula arichta, as it's a hamshacha of hashkivena. Memela, the Gra says, that is only a special rule for a special rule for Kaddish or Chatzi Kaddish. Masha'ein kain for Vishamru, just talking about Shabbos or Yom Tov or the like, the Gra considers that to be an interruption between geula and tefillah. Now, the Chayra, he has a good point, because the Chayra Hashkivenu, Vishamru and Vidaber Maishal Smodei Hashem is not connected to geula per se, so the Chayra, it would be a break. Still, those of us who do say that, well, I don't say it now either, but those shuls or those keilos that say it, they consider it to be an augmentation of geula, and therefore they permit it to be there, right? So the point you need to know is that Kaddish is what you might call a quasi-hefsek, and it's to differentiate Ma'ariv from Shachris, because by Ma'ariv it is a rishus, and by Shachris it is a chayva. Now what about in Chutz La'aretz, Ashkenazim at least, they say after Hashkivenu, they say Baruch Hashem Liolam Amen V'Amen. Right? If anyone has a vague memory of that, I used to know it by heart. I'm not even sure if I do anymore. And the question is, what about Baruch Hashem Liolam? Where does that come from? First of all, where does it even come from? Because the Mishnah itself says in Brachos that the Kriya Shema of Ma'ariv has two brachos before Kriya Shema, HaMa'ariv Aravim and Ohev Amo Yisrael, and two brachos after Shema, Go'al Yisrael and Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad, two before, two after. So where do you get Baruch Hashem Liolam? So the Emes says it's not from the Gemara at all, but Tosfos brings that this was a takana of the Ga'anim to be a substitute Shemona Esrei, because it used to be that the shuls were located in very isolated places, and if somebody came late and had to catch up, and by the time they would daven a whole Shemona Esrei, everybody would leave, and it might be dangerous for them to walk home. So we gave them an abbreviated Shemona Esrei. Baruch Hashem Liolam has 18 psukim, and it's connected to Shemona Esrei, and it ends with a bracha. And some say that the Chatzi Kaddish was originally on Baruch Hashem Liolam, but l'chari that's not correct, because we say Chatzi Kaddish even where we don't say Baruch Hashem Liolam. So it turns out that Baruch Hashem Liolam was a substitute Shemona Esrei. So in Mela it could never be a hefsek between Gula and Tefillah, because it itself has the status of Tefillah on some level. Yeah.
The Torah says that somebody who kills another person by accident, he has to go to Ir HaMiklat. But it allows the relatives to kill him before he gets to Ir HaMiklat. I was wondering if the Rabbi can expand on this and why we allow this.
Yeah. So the issue of Gayal Hadam, the blood avenger, in which a person who kills Bishogeg can be killed by a family member. Some say they're permitted to do so, and some actually say there's a mitzvah for them to do so. So first, I just want to make one thing very, very clear, that there has to be a decision of a beis din that the person is guilty of the crime, meaning it can't just be a vigilante decides, you're guilty and I'm going to kill you. It has to be a psak beis din l'chol hapachas that the person is a shogeg, that he did it. If there's no judicial determination that the person did it, the goel adam is a murderer and is not allowed to act. Okay. But even so, the question that you have is that why should the goel adam be allowed to do it? So apparently what is going on is that even a one who kills b'shogeg is intrinsically chayav misa. He's chayav misa, but the Torah gave him the leniency of being able to be protected in the Ir Miklat. So kol zaman that is not in the Ir Miklat, there is still a chayav misa on him. In other words, the chayav misa stems from the fact that he killed somebody, not from the fact that he did it with premeditation. The only difference is, if you didn't do it with premeditation, the Torah gives you a way out of your death penalty. And if you acted with premeditation, you don't have a way out of your death penalty, but the death penalty is still upon you. Now, let me explain why. And the reason that would be so is that you have to differentiate between shogeg and onus. When we say a person goes to the Ir Miklat, that is only if he engaged in negligent or careless behavior that we would call manslaughter in the English legal concept. So really he was negligent. He didn't look both ways, he didn't stop at a stop sign, etc. If it mamish was an unavoidable accident, I'm standing on a roof and the roof collapses and I fall on somebody, then I don't have to go to the Ir Miklat and the Goel Adam cannot act. So you understand, if you're talking about callousness, if you're talking about a person who didn't care enough to be careful, you could understand that the Torah basically says his life is forfeited, but we'll give him the hatzalah of being in the Ir Miklat. So that would be the svara for the Goel Adam. By the way, interesting question. There is a din of raidef. If somebody's trying to kill me, I can kill them, self-defense. So, if the Goel Adam is trying to kill the Rotseach, does the Rotseach have the right to fight back and kill the Goel Adam? There are Mefarshim that say yes. Now, I think it's a davar pashat that you couldn't apply that to a shaliach beis din. If someone is chayav misa and the beis din is killing him, we're not going to say you have the right to kill, right? But since the Goel Adam is not acting as a shaliach beis din, the Goel Adam could technically be a raidef. But then the problem is, you're creating, what do they call it? The McCoys, that old intergenerational dispute, the Hadleys and the McCoys? Hatfields and the McCoys. Because if the Rotseach kills the Gayal Hadam, then the Gayal Hadam can have another Gayal Hadam who goes after the Rotseach. And the truth of the matter is, if the Gayal Hadam kills the Rotseach, maybe the Rotseach Gayal Hadam. But no, that probably not, because he had the right to do it. So that's a discussion. But still, what this shows you is there is actually a chiyuv misa on the Rotseach b'shegeg. Yeah.
What exactly is a level of Tumah, and how does one move from one level to another level, and what is the 50th level?
Oh, so you're talking about a spiritual tumah, not afa tumah, rishon, sheni, the many halachas. Okay, so a level of tumah in this spiritual definition, and I'll talk about halachic definition versus spiritual definition in a moment. Tumah is distance from God. Now, by definition, anything in a material body is distant from God. Moshe Rabbeinu had a certain distance from Hashem, merely because he was embodied in a physical body. That's inescapable. However, that was the only thing that separated Moshe from God. In every other sense, he was connected to Hashem. Now, the Rambam says, just as physicality creates what is called a mechitza, a barrier of separation, so too the middos that a person has can be barriers. If a person has arrogance, selfishness, egotism, these are barriers that prevent me from closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the greater the person, that means the more barriers he has removed in himself. So the Rambam even says that defines which Nevi'im are greater than other Nevi'im. We don't know, we don't rank them ourselves, but the concept is the fewer mechitzos, the greater the person, the greater number of mechitzos, the lesser the person. So really, I can't describe to you in detail what are the 49 levels of impurity, but basically the increasing levels of impurity refers to the various impediments within a person's personality, primarily pertaining to middos, that block a person from his connection to Hashem. Now, it's not an all or nothing, because even within a single midah, there's infinite variations. Let's assume that selfishness is a midah of blockage. Okay, now, most people have some degree of selfishness, but how strong is the wall? How thick is the wall? If somebody is really, 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 really selfish, we might describe that as, 50 walls of separation. If a person is moderately selfish, there may be 25 walls of separation, meaning Hashem kind of assigns a qualitative weight to the strength and intensity of the barrier that separates you. So the purpose of our learning and our avodas Hashem and our tefillah is to try to purify, right? We say in davening, v'taher libeinu, purify our heart, liavdecha b'emes, so we can serve you with sincerity and with truth, right? So the tikkun hamiddos would involve that idea of working on getting rid of the barriers, tearing down the mechitzas. Right? So that's what the 49 levels of Tumah. Now, halachically, Tumah has a whole other meaning, although it is related, and that is when a person is in a state of Tumah because of contact with a dead body or whatever, there are certain restrictions on their ability to enter the Beis HaMikdash, to do Avaida, to eat Truma, to eat Korbanos. Now, that in and of itself is not necessarily referring to a spiritual impurity, but it's a halachic disability that goes by the term Tumah. Now, Kabbalistically, they in fact are related, because Kabbalah basically says that those sources of Tumah also contaminate you spiritually, which creates a dilemma for us, because we can't avoid those sources of Tumah, because without Parah Aduma, all of us have that Tumas Meis. But nevertheless, you can analyze the laws of Tumah from a purely halachic standpoint without automatically correlating it to spiritual impurity. Now, there too you have degrees of Tumah. A primary source of Tumah, like a dead animal, is called an Av HaTumah. If I touch that dead animal, I am called a Rishon L'Tumah, one removed. If I then touch an apple, that's called a Sheni L'Tumah. For chulin food, that's as far as it goes. If the apple touches a pear, nothing becomes tameh. For truma, you go as far as a shlishi. And for Kodshim, you go as far as a Revi. Now, a person can only be Makabel Tumah from an Afa Tumah, not from a Rishon. So that would mean actually that if I touch a dead animal, I'll talk about a person in a moment because that's a little different. If I touch a dead animal, the dead animal is an Av, I am a Rishon. If I touch another person, that other person is not Tameh at all, because a person is Makabel Tumah only from an Afa Tumah, not from a Rishon. That's why the only way a Rishon conveys Tumah is to food or liquid, not to Kalim and Adam. Now, a human corpse is actually even higher than an Afa Tumah. It is called Avi Avos, the father of Tumah, because everything goes one level. So, for example, if I'm a person and I touch a corpse, I am not a Rishon L'Tumah, I am an Afa Tumah, and therefore if I touch another person, he'll become a Rishon L'Tumah, and then it'll go no further. So that's another application. That wasn't what you were asking, but that's also a halachic application of levels of Tumah. Yeah.
Can you give some insights on Shovavim?
Yeah, Shovavim, again, we talked about this. So Shovavim are these weeks of Shemos, Va'era, Bo, B'Shalach, Yisro, Mishpatim. It spells the word Shovavim. And some add the 2 other weeks, Truma Tetzaveh, so some have this for Shovavim Tot. And Shovavim is a time, it's a stretch of the year that the Mekubalim identified as a time that is very opportune to purify ourselves from sexual errors, whether it be in the case of a married couple, learning the laws of Nida and the laws of Tznius, for single people, working on Shmiras Einayim, not looking at improper things, and to think about Kedusha rather than sexual fantasies and the like. And this is part of how we purify ourselves. Again, maybe it's a longer talk for another time. We do not regard the sexual intimacy of husband and wife as anything that's shameful or dirty, chas v'shalom. We regard it as very, very elevated and very holy. We're not putting that aspect of life down at all. But halacha recognizes that those types of expressions are legitimate only within the confines of a holy marriage, of kedushin, that is sanctified. And that does create a problem for people, because Chazal wanted marriages to be young, because that makes a lot of sense. But today people are not ready. So I appreciate the dilemma of the single young Jewish religious man. It is very, very difficult. It is a very, very great nisayon, especially when you live in a society that is super saturated with sexuality on every corner. You just walk into the street, whatever it is. So it's a very, very difficult nisayon, and I understand the difficulty of the nisayon. But Shovavim is a time when we try to work on this, and Shovavim is a time when there's extra siyata dishmaya that comes into the world to help a person who wants to be mishtadel in this particular avodah. Many of you might know of the website Guard Your Eyes, which is a website devoted to helping people through these nisyonos. And by the way, it's not only single people, married people in various guises can have all sorts of challenges as well with internet and the like. And those who would benefit should check out the website and see what is available for them in this area. But this is what Shovavim is. And again, there's a little bit of a pun in Shovavim, because the word Shovavim is not only an abbreviation for the Parshios, but Shovavim also means a wayward person, a person who wanders off the derech is called Shovev. So Memela, Shovavim is a period of time for those who have walked off the derech, so to speak, and this will help them get on the derech. Now, the connection to these particular weeks is that these are the weeks of Yetziat Mitzrayim. These are the weeks of the Exodus of Egypt. And we understand that the Iker Mitzrayim is not the slavery that is outside of me, but the Iker of Mitzrayim is the slavery that is within me. And this Yetzer Hara can be the strongest slavery that I have. And B'davka, during these weeks, Hashem gives me the koach to be able to leave the inner Mitzrayim that torments me and that holds me back and that prevents me from connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let me just say one thing. I don't want to be marach on this too much because a lot of this is tznius and we talk about it privately. But there is a very important lesson that people have to recognize, and that is if occasionally a person fails and occasionally a person stumbles, it's very important not to give up, and it's very important not to be heartbroken and not to be despondent. Just as the old saying goes, when you fall off the horse, you got to get back on the horse again. There is, unfortunately, in life a yetzer hara to do averos that we all have, but then there's another yetzer hara that after I do the avera, the yetzer hara says, "You see, there's no hope for you. Don't bother. What's the use?" And the emes is the secondary yetzer hara after the chet might even be worse than the first yetzer hara that made you do a chet. The yetzer hara made me do a chet, so I did a chet. But the yetzer hara that comes afterwards and says, what's the purpose of doing tshuva? What's the purpose of trying to fix it? You're going to fail again and again. Why bother to try? That's the worst yetzer hara of all, because that's the yetzer hara that says there's no purpose of ever working on anything. So it's very, very important that when people make mistakes, when people are nichshal in whatever it is, that, okay, I made a mistake. But I go on, and I try to be better the next time, and I don't overly torture myself. A tzaddik can afford to overly torture himself, so to speak, because a tzaddik will be strong and committed even if he made a mistake. But for most of us, if we overly dwell on our failures, we become paralyzed and depressed, and that's not going to help us in our avodas Hashem, right? So it is important not to be overly preoccupied with our mistakes, but to look to the future and recognize that every day is a new opportunity. In fact, Rebbeinu Yaina writes in Yesod HaTshuva, which is really an abbreviated treatment in Shari. Shari Tshuva is a whole book on Tshuva. Yesod HaTshuva is just a few pages. That although Tshuva does require remorse over the past, but the first step of Tshuva is to look at this as if this is the first day of your life. Like the t-shirt saying, today is the first day of the rest of your life. In other words, in a sense, don't look at the past. Say, the past is the past. I got this moment. I got this day, and this is what I'm going to do to make the best of it. They say, b'shem the Vilna Gaon, that same thing with davening. If I'm davening Shmona Esrei, and the yetzer hara distracted me, so I didn't have kavanah, right? I think we've all had the experience. You're holding, let's say, by some bracha in Shmona Esrei, and then the next minute, you seem to be 10 brachas ahead, and you don't even remember. Did I say all this stuff in between? The truth is, you probably did say it in between, but the mind was wandering, and it didn't even register in your conscious memory. That's what they say. The Breitowitz went over to a person after mincha, and he says, "Shalom Aleichem, it's good to see you." So the person said, "I haven't gone anywhere." He says, "Well, I can see from your davening that you were thinking about Paris and London and United States." He says, "You were all over the world." So Shalom Aleichem, right? So the Vilna. So sometimes our attitude is, if I find that I just messed up on 10 brachos, so you figure, okay, this Shemona Esrei is a failure. Let me just finish it up, and I'll daven a better Mariv. Right? I mean, we think that this prayer is forget about it. So the Vilna Gaon says no. He says, if the yetzer hara won in Salach Lanu, you get him back in Re'ena V'Onyenu. And if he gets you on Refuenu, you come back with Porech Aleinu. Meaning, every line is a new thing. Same thing with learning. Sometimes you're having a bad morning seder. So you figure, let's say it's already 11 o'clock or whatever it is. Okay, just start today. Today is not going to work. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it in the afternoon. He says, no, you got 5 minutes left. You can make it a good 5 minutes. Right? Don't allow the failure or the mistakes of the past 2 hours to kind of say, I can't do something good for these last 5 minutes. So in the inyanim of Shmiras Einayim and Shmiras Habris, this is also an important thing to keep in mind. Don't get too broken up over it, because you have the rest of your life to live, and you have to do it in a good way.
So I know with regard, if I'm not mistaken, that Kohanim were during the times of the Beit HaMikdash, they lived around the Beit HaMikdash so they could, because they were doing that order every day, so they needed to be there. But with regards to Levim, who also were highly involved in the Beit HaMikdash, they didn't seem to have like a necessity to live by the Beit HaMikdash. So how did that? I guess why was that the case? And I guess obviously because they had the army club, like why was it situated that they had to live far away, and how did they practically make it to work every day?
Yeah, so the thing is this. The thing is, remember that the Shevet Levi, as you know, did not have their own chelik in Eretz Yisrael. Shevet Levi were given 48 cities, 6 of which were the Arei Miklat, but they had another 42 cities. Now, the 48 cities are scattered throughout Eretz Yisrael. So there were cities next to the Beis HaMikdash, or near Yerushalayim, and there were cities all the way up north and all the way in the south, etc. Now, the simple reason why the Torah scatters Shevet Levi throughout Eretz Yisrael is that Shevet Levi represented the Shevet that was totally devoted. I know we call Yisachar that, but Yisachar also had to be supported. But Shevet Levi's whole goal was Avodas Hashem. So we wanted every part of Eretz Yisrael, every Jewish community, to be near Levium. So we wanted the Levium to be all over the place, so their influence would spread. Now, if you ask me how did they get to work, well, remember this. Just as Kohanim were divided into 24 mishmaros, right? The Kohanim were divided into 24 families. And each family might be more than 1,000 Kohanim. And a mishmar would do all the avodah for the week, and on Shabbos a new mishmar would come in. There were also 24 mishmaros of Leviim that were connected to the 24 mishmaros of Kohanim. So it was not that every Levi had to come to the Beis HaMikdash every day. Meaning, if you were a mishmar of Leviim, on the average, you would have to be in Yerushalayim 2 weeks a year, because the mishmaros turned over, and the sholosh regalim. So, like anyone else, you may live in Haifa or whatever it is, and for 2 weeks a year, a week, and then later a week, and maybe a third week for some, you would come down to Yerushalayim. Because again, we didn't have a situation of all the Leviim working. It was a mishmar system. In fact, even with Kohanim, it's not so pashut that all the Kohanim lived around the Beis HaMikdash. For the same reason, the Mishmaros of Kahuna were also they were connected to the Arei Leviim, and any Ir Levi could have had Kohanim living in there as well. Yeah.
Of course, there's the idea, for the case of Pekuach Nefesh, you can save a life you can break Shabbos to save a life. But I've heard some people will say, oh, anyone who's human, you can say them, and then I've heard other people say, oh no, it has to be a Shomer Shabbat Jew. And then they'll say, oh, unless someone sees you, and then you don't want to think Jews think that way, so you can save someone who's...
Yeah.
Is this true, or is there a mechloket on this, or what is the...
Well, here's the thing. It is very, very clear from the Mishnah itself that the heter to desecrate Shabbos to save a life is only for a Jewish life. It doesn't say it has to be from, though, for a Jewish life and not for a non-Jewish life. The Mishnah gives an example that if a building collapsed on a person, if the person is non-Jewish, we're not allowed to take away the rubble on Shabbos. If the person is Jewish, we are commanded to do so. And if we don't know, so misafek, you take it away, right? You are mechalel Shabbos if you don't know if he's a Jew or a goy. Now, that is the halacha. However, in practice, we have another principle that says if not saving the Jew if not saving the non-Jew would cause hatred and enmity, which would in effect endanger Jewish lives, we are permitted to desecrate Shabbos to save a non-Jew. Some say that only permits rabbinic prohibitions. Some say it even permits Torah prohibitions. So in practice, let's take a simple example. If you're walking in the street and someone that is recognizably a non-Jew, of course you never know, but let's say the person is wearing a crucifix or whatever it is, he's a non-Jew, gets a heart attack, Lamaisa, you will be permitted to take your phone or go to a phone and call Hatzalah or whatever it would be. Now, many have said that this is ethically a very, very difficult halacha, because are we saying that non-Jewish lives don't matter, and that's why we don't desecrate Shabbos? And even with the teretz, that because of Ava we do, well, that may give you a practical answer, but that doesn't really give you a philosophical answer, because Ava is not saying the non-Jewish life is worth anything. It just says, because of Jewish lives, I gotta save the non-Jew. And then you'd be right. If I'm on a desert island, right, and it's just me and the guy, so to speak, and no one's around to see, according to this logic, you would not be allowed to desecrate Shabbos because nobody's going to be around to form a negative opinion. So that is the halacha. So in a sense, the halacha as a halacha says, don't save non-Jews. Practically, we save non-Jews, either doraisa or D'Rabbainu, and it's very easy, by the way, to turn any doraisa into a D'Rabbainu by just doing it b'shinui. I mean, that already makes it D'Rabbainu. Now, what about the ethical problem? What type of ethical system do we have when we say that a non-Jewish life is not worth saving? So I think one way to look at it is this. It's not that the non-Jewish life is not worth saving. Rather, Shabbos is so sacred that it can only be desecrated for one who may keep Shabbos in the future. Now, you notice I didn't say who will keep Shabbos in the future, but who may keep Shabbos in the future. And that would pick up even the non-religious Jew that is not a Shomer Shabbos. We are permitted and commanded to desecrate Shabbos on his behalf because there's always a good chance he will do tshuva. And if you're going to tell me, well, then save a non-Jew because maybe the non-Jew might convert, well, number one, conversion is less likely than tshuva. And number two, when he converts, he's a new person. So the person he is now is not the person that's going to be keeping Shabbos, because conversion changes a person's identity, right? So that would be the basic halachic rules for that. Yeah.
Regarding, let's say you invite your non-religious Jewish friend to your Shabbat Suda Friday night, but he tells you beforehand that he's going to drive home after.
Yeah.
Are you still allowed to invite him because maybe he'll keep Shabbat in the future? Like there's some people that say, no, it's like you're allowing him to go and
Right. So this is a very, very famous question. Can I invite a guest or a friend to my house for a Shabbat meal if I know he's going to drive? This comes up a lot, not only in individual social contexts, but primarily in kiruv events. You make a Shabbaton, and initially people are not Shomer Shabbos, but you want them to come because that's how they'll learn about Shabbos and the like, and yet they're going to drive. So this is a big machlokas, actually. Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote a tshuva back in the 1950s, in which he said it was absolutely usher to invite a person that you know is going to drive on Shabbos because you're causing them to sin, and even though they would be sinning anyway in whatever they're doing, you're not allowed to be the cause of them doing an aveira. However, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and even Rav Moshe Sternbach and other poskim as well are cholek on this heter, cholek on this issue rather, and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach basically says that you are absolutely allowed to invite them for Shabbos, but there are a number of conditions. Number one, you do have to offer them accommodations for all of Shabbos. You do have to offer them accommodations, and they have to be real. They have to be comfortable. They have to be real. And you cannot extend invitations beyond your capacity to accommodate. So if you're inviting 100 people for a Shabbaton, and you only have room for 50 of them, you would not be allowed to extend the invitation unless you have 100. You'd have to have 100 places for 100 people. That's one condition. Now, if they then say that they don't want to stay for all of Shabbos, but they'll come for the day meal or the night meal, you are permitted to let them come. And the svara is, there's a twofold svara. There are two reasons why, even though you're causing them to drive, there are two reasons why it would be mutter. One is the potential of future Shabbos. Now, the way we describe pikuach nefesh, why can I desecrate Shabbos to save a person? Because we say, better to desecrate one Shabbos now, in order that the person will keep many Shabbos in the future. So there's a similar type of argument here, that if by exposing this person to Shabbos now, over time, it won't be instantaneously, but over time, it's more likely that they will gravitate to a complete Shmira Shabbos. So the short-term Aveira that you're causing might be justified in terms of the long-term benefit. Now that doesn't mean it has to be a certainty. It's never a certainty. But if there's a reasonable possibility that this could happen, this would fall under the rubric of Chalel Olav Shabbos Achas Kidei Sheyishmor Shabbos Eis Harbe. Now, based on that analysis, I think there may be a difference in what type of event you're talking about. Let's consider two paradigms. One is it's a kiruv event where there's going to be shiurim and there's going to be inspiration and there's going to be, a lot of Torah learning. So that's a thing where a person might get inspired. But what if it's simply a social event? I'm inviting somebody for Shabbos to hang around. Let's hang around together. And maybe there's not going to be any particular Torah or anything else. Just, I haven't seen you for a while. Why don't you come over Shabbos afternoon? It's not so pashut that that's going to lead to... Now, maybe it would. You have to be honest with yourself. But if there's no kiruv component there, it may not be mutter. But there's a second rationale that may apply. And that is, even if you knew for sure, and you never know for sure, that this guy is never going to be a Shomer Shabbos, even for this Shabbos alone, he might be better off. Because if he doesn't come to your house, he's going to be Mechal Shabbos in a gazillion ways. Go to the beach, go to the movies, go to the mall. Now, you're inviting him to your house, so he's going to drive. Okay. But for the next 3, 4, 5 hours, Semiros, Kiddush, Birkas Hamazon, he's not going to be desecrating Shabbos for those 3 hours. So it's hard to total it up, but if you would total up which way is he doing more Averis and which way is he doing less Averis, it could very well be that he comes out ahead by driving to your house on Shabbos and staying there for 4 hours. He's actually doing less Averos than he would had you not invited him, and he'd be at home. So Mimela, instead of saying, I'm causing him to sin, you can actually say, I'm causing him to reduce his Averos and live more in compliance with the will of God. Now, the second svara is a much bigger kula than the first svara, because the first svara rests on the long-term benefit of making him a complete Shomer Shabbos. The second svara would justify it, even if there is no long-term benefit, but for that Shabbos alone. Now, it's interesting, Rav Shlomo Zalman's tshuva emphasized the long-term benefit, that eventually he will keep Shabbos. But Rav Moshe Sternbach seemed to talk about the short-term benefit. Rav Moshe Sternbach had a shaila, and this may be Nogeya, people here. Pardon me, just have a bad cough here. In which an Avrech wanted to invite his parents to come for Shabbos, and his parents were going to drive. Is he allowed to invite his parents? And Rav Sternbach said, yeah. He said, the importance of keeping a good relationship with your parents is so fundamental that you're actually causing something to be positive in the sense that, at least for this Shabbos, they're going to spend the Shabbos in a proper way. So even though you're not going to make them a Shomer Shabbos, but there'll be a preservation of that family relationship plus that one Shabbos. So the bottom line is that we are pretty lenient on this. I do suggest to people the following, that if somebody tells you, if you're given a choice, somebody tells you, I can only come for either Friday night or Shabbos morning. I'll come for one of them, but not the whole day. I suggest to people it is better to invite them for Friday night. And the reason is because Friday night, you can give them an arrival time before Shabbos. So the invitation is not machriach them to be Machal Shabbos. And once they get there, maybe you can convince them, give them something to drink, say, well, you can't go back now. I mean, you're drunk, etc. Masha ein kain, if you invite them for Shabbos morning, inevitably, they're going to have to be Mechal Shabbos. So when there is a choice, Friday night is a better choice than Shabbos day. But Lamaisa, even if they say, I'm only going to come Shabbos day, they don't give you that choice. It is permitted to have them as long as you indicate that you're welcome to stay for all of Shabbos. Yeah.
Yes, how does one be empathetic towards others and their problems without letting it harm them? Family members where the attachment is very close.
Yeah, how can a person be empathetic without having the problems of other people harm them in different ways? That's very, very difficult. You know, there's a famous Mishnah in Kedushin that says the best of the doctors go to hell, go to Gehenna. And with apologies to anyone whose parent is a physician, there are different interpretations. Some say the best of the doctor is a balgaiva, whatever it is, and therefore they don't believe that Hashem is doing it, so they go to Gehenna. But there's an old interpretation I once heard, which is not the Pashat Pshat, that the best of the doctors go into the Gehenna that their patients are suffering. Meaning someone is sick, someone is suffering. Now, you know, a doctor often has to be detached. A doctor has to be removed. A doctor is not supposed to get too emotionally involved. That may throw off the judgment. And now all of that is true. There has to be a certain amount of detachment. But when the doctor stops feeling with empathy the suffering of the patient, he's no longer the best of the doctors. The best of the doctors feel the pain. So the truth of the matter is, this is something that is called in Judaism, nosei bi'ol es chavero. You carry the yoke of your friend. My friend's suffering is also on me. I feel their pain. I feel their joys. But when they're going through tough times, it bothers me. It affects me. And just like if someone has a heavy weight on their shoulder and somebody else comes along and carries half of the weight, it's lighter. So when I can carry somebody's burden with them, they're going to feel lighter. It's going to be lighter because they know that other people care, other people are carrying. So to feel the pain of other people is a very, very great mitzvah. It's a very great chesed. It's one of the middos that we strive to develop, to have empathy, to have compassion, to feel the sufferings of others. This is one of the reasons that Moshe Rabbeinu was chosen by Hashem to be the leader of the Jewish people. Because in spite of the fact that he was growing up in the house of Paro, he was powerful, he would go out and see the sufferings of the Jewish people. And it would bother him. It would hurt him. Right? He sees the Egyptian hitting the Jew. And he can't be soivelit. He kills the Mitzri with the Shem Hashem. And later when he takes care of sheep and is a shepherd, he has rachamim for the little sheep that need to drink and need to be carried. You see that Moshe Rabbeinu was zeicha to be a leader because of this empathy, because of this compassion that he had for others. So the problem is, though, if a person is overly sensitive, or whatever overly sensitive means, it can sometimes depress you and break you. So it's a big challenge. I mean, sometimes you can't allow yourself to feel to the maximum degree that you should because of our weaknesses that will drag us down. So we have to have a certain sense of self-preservation. It's like chayecha kaidman. What does the Gemara say? If I only have enough water to keep me alive or you alive, and if I try to keep you alive, I'm going to die, I got to worry about my own survival. That's not selfishness, but if I have to make a choice, I have a life to live, and I can't allow myself to be destroyed. So it is a very, very big challenge. All I can tell you is it would be a real, real tragedy if my instinct and my need for self-preservation would make me be unfeeling towards the sorrows of other people. So the Baal HaTanya suggests that you kind of segment your day, like you spend like an hour in which you really, really feel the pain of others. And then the rest of the day, you have to be a bit more focused on what you need to do. But it is a challenge. One should not strive. The goal of being a religious Jew is not to become a more colder and unfeeling person. That is not a sign of progress. Even though sometimes there's a sense that, I stop caring about those other people or whatever it would be. That would be a very, very backwards step in Avodas Hashem. Yeah.
So this question was sent in. Chazal say sometimes we must say certain things. For example, Bishvili Nivra Olam, or we say the Shabbos Tzarich Adam so face or Erev Shabbos. To what extent is this cleave to say these things?
What was the second one you said? The first is Bishvili Nivra Olam.
And Tzarich Adam.
Oh, yeah. So the question is, when Chazal talk about you must say certain things, how literal is that? Must I say it? So the two examples in the question was a person must say, like the Mishnah says in Sanhedrin, why did God create only one person? Or maybe one man, one woman. So each person should say, Bishvili, because of me, the world was created. God made many cows and many elephants and many dogs. Only one human, or one man, one woman. So each person should say, for one person, the whole world was justified. So on that one, do I have to say it? Do I have to say the words Bishvili Nivra Olam? So the truth of the matter is, I can't give a universal answer. Meaning there are clearly going to be passages where the verb saying is referring to really thinking about it. It does not require articulation. On the other hand, the second example you gave is not about talking to yourself. It's about being sure that your family has done what is necessary to get ready for Shabbos, right? A person must say to his family, Isartem, did you take off the trumas and the masros? Eiraftem, did you make the necessary Erev preparations? Hadlika was an air, go and light the candles. Now, there you understand, when we're talking about not talking to yourself, but talking to other people, so then thinking is not enough, right? You do have to mention it. But nevertheless, even then, it is not a chiyuv to say those specific things. But really what Chazal are telling us is that, in a more general way, that you, if you're the head of a household, you have the obligation before Shabbos to be sure that everything's in order. So that may or may not mean you tell people, but you got to take care of it. In other words, I think that what you walk away from that Maimer Chazal is the sense of responsibility more than having to articulate specific words. Yeah.
Many people nowadays are marketed for Rebbe Yehuda Tam when it comes to alcohol, and I just want to know how or why many people are still koshish for it, even though like when we look outside, it's already in nighttime, already way past
Yeah. So very, very quick introduction. This is a subject upon which there is a massive literature. You can quite literally fill a bookcase with svarim on this sugya. This is a huge sugya, and that is the definition of night. When is night? So we essentially have a big machlokas. Again, I'm going to be obviously I'm going to simplify this. A huge machlokas between what is called the Shitas HaGaonim, it's from the Gaonim, and the Shita of D'Rabbeinu Tam. According to the Shitas HaGaonim, as soon as the sun sets, which is Shigias Achama, we have a period that is known as bein Hashmashot. It's a twilight, which is a safek yom, safek laila. But bein Hashmashos only lasts for the amount of time it takes to walk 3/4 of a meal. Now, what is a meal? A meal is 2,000 amos. So 3/4 of a meal is 3/4 of that. And we paskin that the shear of walking a meal is 18 minutes. So 3/4 of 18 minutes is whatever it is, like 15 and something. Which means, according to the Ga'ainim, listen to this, listen to how lenient this would be. According to the Ga'ainim, from sunset to Tzeis HaKochavim is a little bit more than 15 minutes. Now, what on earth does that mean? According to the Gaonim, I can end Shabbos? Don't tell anybody. I could end Shabbos 15 minutes, or was that say 16 minutes after Shkia? Well, so there are a few things you need to know about the Ga'inim. First of all, the Ga'inim's time is going to expand, meaning the Ga'inim are referring to an equinox day. That's twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, when daylight is 12 hours and night is 12 hours. So at that particular point in time, Einachinami, Shabbos is over after 16 minutes. But different times of year, the period is going to be longer. Okay, that's one cheshbon to know. The other cheshbon to know is that even though many do paskin like the Ga'inim, because of Tosefes Shabbos and because of uncertainty, they don't end Shabbos earlier than a half an hour or 33 minutes after Shkia. But even that is pretty early. Okay? But even 33, 42, all of that is based on the Gaonim, although you're actually making it much longer than the Gaonim. Rebbeinu Tam has a very different shita. Rebbeinu Tam says that it is not Seisa Kechavim until 72 minutes after Shkia. Now there's a big machlokas in Rebbeinu Tam. Is that a fixed time the whole year, or does that also change with the times of year? That's another machlokas. And there's also a machlokas, is the shir 72 minutes or is the shir 90 minutes? Okay? Now, many people, particularly B'nai Torah, do follow Rebbeinu Tam Shita. Now what's interesting is that many say that Rebbeinu Tam Shita was never meant to apply in Eretz Yisrael. Because the way it works is this. The closer you are to the equator, the shorter is twilight. Twilight is the period between sunset and the appearance of stars in the sky. So Rebbeinu Tam was writing about France. Actually, he was not writing about France, but some want to say he was referring to France. France is north of the equator. North or south of the equator, twilight is longer, so you don't have the appearance of stars in the sky till around 72 minutes. But in Eretz Yisrael, which is very close to the equator, right, you can notice this, right? You see this. You see that after sunset, it gets dark here much quicker than it would in New York or even Florida, because we're closer to the equator. So many Shitas say that even if a person was machmir to follow Rabbeinu Tam in chutz la'aretz, they should not have to follow Rabbeinu Tam in Eretz Yisrael, because the Re'iyas HaKechavim is much, much earlier than 72 minutes. Right? So the truth of the matter is, you're 100% correct. It does not make a lot of sense to follow Rabbeinu Tam in Eretz Yisrael. But those that had the minhag in Chutz La'aretz, they wanted to continue this minhag because essentially it gets converted into a Tosefes Shabbos, meaning it's no longer a question of Laila, but it was my Kabbalah that this is how long I keep Shabbos. They tell a story when the Brisker Rav came to Eretz Yisrael, and again, Brisk has a twist on Rabbeinu Tam where they do 90 minutes instead of 72 minutes. They don't end Shabbos till 90 minutes after Shkia. So Rebbe Yehuda HaNassi was a dayan in London, and then he came to Bayit V'gan, and Rebbe Yehuda HaNassi was one of the Talmidim Mufakim of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. And he and the Brisker Rav were very good friends. Rebbe Yehuda HaNassi took the Brisker Rav outside a half an hour after Shkia and said, "Look at the sky, look at the sky. The halach is all you need is 3 stars and Shabbos is over. The sky has 100 stars, look." And they say, "So what are you waiting 90 minutes?" And the Brisker Rav closed his eyes. He says, I'm not looking. Halacha overrides the mitzias. And our halacha is Rabbeinu Tam. I don't care what the sky says. Okay, I mean, that's what the Brisker Rav said, but Lamaisa, it's very, very schwer, because Lamaisa, when you have Kechavim, that is by definition the end of the day, that's night. So to say, I got to keep Shabbos 40 minutes extra after Riyas HaKechavim is very, very difficult. But so you have a point. There is a svara, a very good svara, as Rabbi Chazal Ramsky said, that the chumrah of Rabbeinu Tam should only apply to north or southern latitudes, It should not apply to things that are closer to the equator.
But even in other countries, it would, still doesn't take that long for it to get nice, does it?
So again, let me point out that the question becomes this. The question becomes, l'chayra, you do have three, in other words, if 3 stars is the end of the day and it's the definition of night, you do have 3 stars earlier than 72 minutes. So the question then becomes, how does D'Rabbeinu Tam reconcile? D'Rabbeinu Tam gives you a share of 72 minutes, or 90 minutes, depending on how long a meal is. D'Rabbeinu Tam's share is 4 mil. So if a meal is 18 minutes, the time of walking a meal, so 4 mil is 72 minutes. Others say a meal might be up to 22 minutes, so that would give you 88 minutes, etc., close to 90. But the question is, either way, you do have Gimel Kechavim earlier, right? So how does D'Rabbeinu Tam understand that with the statement that Gimel Kechavim is Laila? So and that's a big shaila, exactly. How does D'Rabbeinu Tam even deal with that Gemara? But some say that he means you have to have Gimel Kechavim in the western part of the sky, which remains brightest when the sun sets. The sun sets in the west, so there's still some light. So even though the sky may be filled with stars, but until the share of D'Rabbeinu Tam in those climates, you don't have stars all the way on the western horizon that still has a little bit of light. So that would be an interpretation. But in Eretz Yisrael, you do. You even have that. So that's why it's still emes that there's a strong svara not to apply D'Rabbeinu Tam in Eretz Yisrael. And indeed, the minhag of Eretz Yisrael was not to follow D'Rabbeinu Tam, precisely for this reason. It's not a question of modern versus, the most Haredi, the most devout people in Eretz Yisrael typically followed the Ga'inim. That was the minhag of Eretz Yisrael. And with Tosefes Shabbos, they would wait a half an hour or 33 minutes or whatever. Much earlier than, nobody ends Shabbos in America 33 minutes. Nobody does that, unless you're not a Shomer Shabbos. People wait at least 42 minutes in the United States, but in Eretz Yisrael, 33 minutes for Shabbos and for Yom Kippur was commonly makubal until people started keeping D'Rabbeinu Tam, which was a later hanhaga. Yeah.
I've heard once that what's it called? Bein Hashmashot is like an inherent safek by the Jewish people. Is that true, or is it like something that got lost in the generations? Then I guess if that's so, then why is there something that's an inherent safek in?
Clearly
Hashem knows when Bein Hashmashot is.
Right. Well, yeah, Hashem knows. Yeah. Again, Bein Hashmashot generally is what we call twilight in English, and twilight is the period between the setting of the sun, Shkia, and the stars coming out, and the machlokas, the Ga'inim and D'Rabbeinu Tam is how long is the Bein Hashmashos period. And the Gemara actually says that Bein Hashmashos, there are 3 doubts about Bein Hashmashos, which can actually turn into infinite doubts. Either the whole Bein Hashmashos period is still day, or the whole Bein Hashmashos period is still night, or at some point in the middle, it switches from day to night. Of course, at some point in the middle could mean an infinite number of gradations. Now, that's why we go l'chumra in both situations. Imagine this. Why is it that we have to start Shabbos by Shkia, but we can't end Shabbos until Seisa Kochavim? That's why Shabbos is more than 24 hours. Shabbos is, 24 and a half hours or 25 hours, or like D'Rabbeinu Tam, or whatever it would be. The reason is because you got to go l'chumra. When it's Shkia Friday, I have to be choshesh, maybe Bein Hashmashos is night. But when it's Motzei Shabbos, I have to be choshesh, it's day. Right? I have to go l'chumra on both sides of it. This raises an interesting anomaly. I'll get to your question. This raises an interesting anomaly about a bris. The only bris that's docha Shabbos is a bris on the 8th day. Right? If you're doing a bris on the 9th day, it's not docha Shabbos. So imagine this scenario here. A baby is born after Shkia on Friday before Tzeisa Kechavim. So when will the baby have his bris? Now, if Bein Hashmashos is Shabbos already, this would be a Shabbos baby who would have a Shabbos bris. If bein Hashmashot is Friday, is daytime, he's a Friday baby, they would have a Friday bris. But here is the interesting dilemma. The safek is it a Friday bris or a Shabbos bris? But I can't do the bris on Friday, and I can't do the bris on Shabbos. I can't do the bris on Friday because if bein Hashmashot is night, Friday is the 7th day of the birth, and you can't do a bris early. But I can't do it on Shabbos because maybe it is a Friday baby, and Shabbos would be the 9th day, and I can't do a 9th day bris on Shabbos. So the irony is you can't do the bris until Sunday, even though Sunday is for sure the wrong day. Sunday is either the 9th day, if it was a Shabbos baby, or it's the 10th day, if it's a Friday baby. But, right, so why am I doing it on the 9th or the 10th? Because the two possibilities for the 8th day, which is Friday or Shabbos, I can't do it. Now, you're asking me, is bein Hashmashot something that we once knew and we forgot, or it was lost, or it was something that intrinsically is a safek? It seems to be, Chazal never tell us that somehow there was this knowledge and we lost it. It seems to be a safek that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put into the Bria, and the obvious question is, why would Hashem create a system in which we live in a state of uncertainty? And this is called an unresolvable uncertainty. In other words, there is absolutely no possible way you can resolve the status of bein Hashmashot. Safek yom, safek laila, safek miktsasei min hayom, safek miktsasei min laila. In fact, the Gemara even says, let's say a person did malacha. Let's say Shabbos is going into Yom Kippur, although our calendar, it's not possible, but let's just, right? And I do malacha bein Hashmashot. So l'chayra, since doing malacha on Shabbos b'shegeg, you bring a korban chatas, and doing malacha on Yom Kippur b'shegeg, you also bring a korban chatas. So if the only thing I don't know is it Yom Kippur or is it Shabbos, miman nafshach, I should bring a chatas. The Mishnah says in Krisos, no, because maybe it changed in the middle of your malacha, so you did half of the malacha on Shabbos and half the malacha on Yom Kippur, so you're not chayav a chatas, because it might have switched right in the middle. But your kasha is a good kasha. I want to think about it a little bit. I mean, it's a kasha that's occurred to me also, and that is, what is the spiritual tachlis of the Eibishter creating what is halachically a no-man zone? No-man zone. In other words, basically we just don't know what it is. Nobody can define it. Like, what's the purpose of that? I mean, shouldn't we have a clear definition of what is day and what is night? That's Nogeya Shabbos, it's Nogeya Yom Kippur, it's Nogeya everything. And yet we have this thing that is simply unresolved. But the most I can tell you is, as far as all of the rayas are concerned, we never knew this. This is something that is intrinsic. Hashem knows, but the emes is, what I would say is this. I would not even say Hashem knows. Hashem created this to be undefined time. If you were to ask Hashem, what is bein Hashmashot? Hashem would say, this is an undefined time that I put into the Bria. Yeah.
How should us reacting to Omicron? Should we be taking any precautions?
Yeah.
Should we be ignoring it?
Well, this is one of the things that I get in trouble for, so I don't want to be marked too much, but I'll just say this. Omicron has there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is Omicron is very, very spreadable, very, very contagious, and it spreads faster even than regular corona. That's the bad news. The very, very good news is that although it spreads very, very rapidly, it seems to be, so far, Baruch Hashem, a much more milder form than the corona variants that we had earlier. And therefore, Baruch Hashem, the morbidity rate, the mortality rate is way, way, way down. And in some ways, thank you, in some ways, I mean, I thought personally that the reaction to all of corona was over the top and unreasonable, but even more so now. So I think Baruch Hashem, it is a relatively safe time, but still, one should try to obey the rules of the government, the Misrat HaBriyut, and it's a chilul Hashem to openly disobey these health regulations. But Baruch Hashem, see, the way mutations work is this. Viruses are very clever things, although they don't have brains per se. But viruses find all sorts of ways to mutate into new forms to escape vaccines or the like. There's this survival instinct in a virus that it keeps on going and going and going and changing and changing and changing and the like. But the mahalach of viruses as they mutate is they often become less strong until they eventually become like the common cold or whatever it is. And that's kind of the mahalach of viruses, that mutations lose some of their potency with time. Part of it is, I'll tell you why, it's an amazing thing how Hashem made viruses so able to manipulate and survive. Part of it is because as more and more people are vaccinated, there are maybe fewer people that the virus can hit. So somehow the virus needs to have more survivors so it continue to spread to more people. Because if it kills everybody, you've lost a lot of people who could spread the virus, right? So it has to, how does the virus how to know this, so to speak? I don't know. But that's part of it, that if you were a virus and you are getting fewer and fewer people that you can infect, you'll not want to kill the people that you infect so they could spread it to other people. But I think, as I say, I think Omicron is, thank God, Baruch Hashem, it should continue, is not at all that serious. And so that's a good news, yeah.
This is a question sent in from a Bacher.
Yep.
War, plague, and famine were things that affected the world in the past and made people cleave to Hashem. We don't have those same exact issues today, so how do people cleave to Hashem now?
Well, I tell you, in a way, after going through almost 2 years with Corona, I think we have our own plagues and our own wars, which can make us recognize how much we need Hashem. I've said this many times before, but it's so obvious that modern society, modern man, prides himself on his ability to control his world. Well, we control our world. We have air conditioning that protects us from the heat, and we have heat that protects us from the cold, and we have shelter, and we have buildings, and we have science, and we have technology, and we don't even need rain that much today because we have artificial irrigation systems. So we're in control, right? All these natural things don't affect us to the same degree. So every once in a while, Hashem has to remind us how weak we are, how vulnerable we are, how precarious we are. And this little virus takes over the world and kills so many people. And Hashem is telling you, don't think you're so powerful in your cocoon that you think you don't need Hashem. You need Hashem every single moment of your life. Without Hashem, there's nothing. In fact, the Kotzker Rebbe says a gewaldige Wort. There's a Chazal that says that if a person has food in his house and he says, "What will I eat tomorrow?" So Chazal say that person lacks faith. Katane Yamuna. So most people learn that why does he lack faith? Why is he wondering what he'll have tomorrow? He should have emunah. Hashem will take care of him. He lacks faith. But you know what the Kotzker Rebbe says? Kotzker Rebbe says exactly the opposite. A guy has food in his house, and he thinks, I only need God for tomorrow. That's a lack of faith. He needs God even for today. Meaning, he shouldn't be confident in the food in his cupboard that that's going to keep him alive. Things can vanish in a moment. You hear the Kotzker Rebbe's Chiddush. The problem is not that he's worried about tomorrow. The problem is he's overconfident about today. How can you be right? You can't be confident about anything. Can't be confident about anything. In fact, there was a Maisa once, I think, the whole Maisa they tell, I don't remember all the details. It was a Maisa about a guy that was telling his Rav, or telling a tzaddik, telling a big tzaddik, he says, you're telling me I need Hashem, every moment of my life? He says, I'm a wealthy person, I have everything I need. I know that life can change, but right now, what could happen? What could happen? I'm totally secure. So the Rebbe told him, you never know. So the story goes that the guy's walking in the street, and he walks by a monastery, and all of a sudden, he has this unbelievable desire that he wants to donate all of his millions and millions of dollars, or whatever rubles, to the galach, to the priest. And he doesn't know why this was so. He never had an attraction. And he goes in and he, gives everything over to the church. They take everything. He walks out a pauper. He's poor. And then, like 5 minutes later, he says, "What did I just do?" He goes to the Rebbe and says, "You see, you need Hashem, You think you're okay at 10 o'clock? You could lose everything at 10:01, right?" So part of, I'm sorry, it was your question. Part of it was to, I'm sorry, was your question? Yeah. Part of it was to recognize that we need Hashem so much. And the truth of the matter is, there are enough tragedies in the world that we feel that way. The tragedies of death and disease and illness, and the tragedies, although nobody asked me about it, maybe I'm lucky, I'm going to escape from that, but the tragedies of sexual abuse and child molestation, even within the religious communities. So, if there's any silver lining to these very, very sad events, it makes us yearn for Geula, yearn for Mashiach, and know how much we need the Rachamim of Hashem. Yeah.
So decision making is a very big part of life. What advice would you give to somebody before making a decision? And what's the right mindset?
Yeah, decision making is very important. What advice do you give? So there's a Messiah from Rav Chaim of Volozhin who says that when a person is at a crossroads, a person is a quandary, the person doesn't know what to do in life, he should set aside a period of 2 hours where he learns with complete concentration without interruption, and that cleanses his mind, purifies his neshama, connects him to Hashem, and then the thought that comes into your mind at that point will be the Ratzain Hashem, clear of all of the static and all of the taivas and all of the agendas that you have, right? So that's one thing to do. Set aside a time where you don't think about your problem. You just sit and you learn. The other thing is, Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, Daiga b'leivish yishchena, which literally means when a person has worry in his heart, it can bend him over, it could destroy him. But Chazal have a drush that instead of reading it yishchena, they read it yisichena. Have somebody to talk over with. Now, obviously, we can talk about go to a Rebbe, go, etc. But even having a friend is very, very useful. Someone that cares about you and someone that understands you. And then you can talk about things. And sometimes you'll find that some of the biases that block you kind of go away when you're talking to another person about it. I know myself, often it's happened that I had a certain problem I had. And I didn't know what to do. And then that very same day, somebody calls me up with the same problem. Kind of the same problem. And somehow, when it's about giving somebody else advice, I might come up with the right answer. Well, why couldn't I come up with the right answer for me? Why did I have to learn from what I said to somebody else? I don't know if you ever had that experience. Because when it was about me, I had my personal biases, my nogeya b'davar. When I'm giving advice to somebody else, I'm not nogeya b'davar, right? So sometimes the advice you give to somebody else can be a very good eitzah for you. Now, there's a story, some of you might have heard of Rav Tzvi Hirsch Weinrib. He was a Rav in Baltimore for a number of years, and then he became the executive director of the OU. Now he's emeritus director. A very chashuv person. He happens to be a clinical psychologist as well. So he tells a beautiful story that when he was deciding to move from psychology to Rabbanis, although I'm not sure I call that a move, but okay, psychology to Rabbanis, what happened was he wasn't sure. So although he was not Chabad, he called up Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask an eitzah, and Lubavitcher Rebbe's secretary answered, who was a chashuv also, Rav Chodakov, Zechrono Livracha. And Rav Chodakov asks him what the shaila is, and Rabbi Weinrib says he heard the Rebbe's voice in the background. Who's calling? And so Rav Chodakov said, it's a person from Maryland who's calling about changing careers. So the Rebbe said, tell him to talk to Weinrib in Maryland. Weinrib, Maryland gives good eitzes. Wow. So, because the Rebbe knew everybody, even though they never met him, but he knew everybody, he knew about everybody. So the secretary says, the Rebbe says, ask Weinrib in Maryland. So Rabbi Weinrib says, I'm Weinreb in Maryland. So Rabbi Chodakov says to the Rebbe, this is Weinreb. So the Rebbe says, so tell Weinreb to ask himself. Now, there's something profound in that, and that is, although we need to consult with others, we need to talk to our Rebbeim, we need to even have a chaver to talk to, but we also have to know that Hashem put it within us to kind of figure out the mahalech that's right for us in our avodas Hashem. Shlomo HaMelech talks about Mayim Amukim Eitza B'Leivish, that wisdom within a person's heart is like deep water that you have to draw out. So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said many years ago that he was unhappy with what he called the Hasidification of the Litvish Torah world. By Hasidim have a Masori that you go to a Rebbe for everything. But he says that was not the way of Slobodka. That was not the way of the yeshivas, where the Rebbeim taught you how to think for yourself. The Rebbeim taught you how to be independent. The Rebbeim gave you the kalim, where you could figure things out instead of asking every little thing to somebody. And Rav Yaakov said that was not a good thing. A person should develop that capacity. Now, I saw this with my very own eyes. I've probably said this a lot of times, so forgive me. I was once zocheh to have a conversation with Rav Yaakov, the only one time in my life, and I thought it would be a 15-minute conversation. He gave me 3 hours about all sorts of things. Just amazing. He was sitting there in shirt sleeves, and he wanted to make me lunch and give me a place to sleep because I went from Baltimore to Muncie. Just very amazing. Like a gadol hador that had all the time in the world. You're not going to get that today, unfortunately. So the one thing I remember is that he didn't answer a single question. He wanted to know what I thought, and he kept on bringing up questions for me to think about. Did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? In other words, he wanted me to figure out what was the right thing to do. Do you see the chiddush there? And really, that's an ideal Rebbe, and that's an ideal parent. To give your talmidim and to give your children the kalim to be able to understand what they need to do in their life. Now, that doesn't mean you never ask a Rebbe. That doesn't mean you never ask a gadol. Of course you do. But it does mean that fundamentally your decisions have to come from your understanding of things, because every person is different. Yeah.
So, Rebbe sort of brought it up in a backhand way. I actually wanted to ask a different question, but it answered my question. You see some recent events in the Orthodox community about sexual abuse and whatever that have kind of...
I should have kept quiet, yeah.
Yeah. So my question kind of leads in from that. So you see certain examples of things. I guess this is a question stemming from modern morality. I just want to know why the Torah thinks, why Hashem said a certain way, because it says we see certain things in Torah don't have obvious punishments, even though we consider them morally wrong, like sexual abuse of children and stuff like that, or rape necessarily, that it has punishment that isn't so strict, but there's certain sexual things, exploits that we see as inherently immoral, like within the family and stuff like that. In certain things, like in regards to homosexuality, for example, Hashem says it's te'avas, it's te'avas, and your love, it's yeah, even though it's very difficult to get caught. Why does that have a stricter punishment than, let's say, terrible things, especially considering that in a lot of those times it could be potential? I'm not saying it's necessarily right. I just want to know why.
Excuse me. Yeah, so really you're asking two questions. One is the Torah is so strict on things that don't seem to be so bad, right? You gave an example of homosexuality. The other is the other way around, that things that we regard as, we and even the frum people regard as totally horrendous, such as child molestation and rape, not such a big deal. Now, The truth is, your second question is a much, much more difficult question than the first, because the first question I would just say is that, yeah, if the Torah answers the expression of male homosexuality, it is that bad. The fact that we don't get so outraged is because we've been influenced by society. So we should learn from the Torah rather than from society. But your second question is a real difficult question. I mean, let's be realistic here. Let's imagine, what is the punishment in the Torah for raping a single unmarried woman, an unmarried woman? What is the punishment? Now, at least in the United States, in terms of criminal law, you used to be able to get the death penalty for that, right? That was chamor shabachamuros. And yet, it is absolutely clear that rape of a single woman is not a capital crime, 100%. And really, it's kind of a financial crime. Ones umafata. If you're ma'ane, say, a basula, so you pay a certain amount of money, and it doesn't even go to her. It would go to her father. If she's above, well, okay, we might say if she's above 12 and a half, it'll go to her, go to her. But it's money. That's a pretty light, 50 shkalim. That's a pretty light punishment for rape, which is considered to be chamor shebechamuros. And to make it even worse, God forbid, Rahman al-Islam, molestation of a child. Sexual molestation of a child is treated the same as rape of a single woman, which once again is a financial penalty. Right? And that is something that's very, very difficult to understand. How could that be? When we think about what is the possibly worst thing that a human being can do, we would think molesting a child is like the worst thing, right? And this is, right, this is not a difference in religious people and non-religious people. Religious people would feel the horror even more. And part of why we get so shaken up when, God forbid, we uncover incidences of this in the religious community. We can't, people accuse, I don't want to get into it, people accuse the religious word of covering up. But I'll tell you, part of what is called covering up, and without criticizing anybody, is we just can't believe it. Or many people we just can't believe it. I can't believe it's possible. I can't believe it. So I deny it. Not that I'm trying to cover it up. I can't believe it. So your question is a very excellent question. So why does the Torah deal with things, with those horrific things, without necessarily such a great punishment system? It's been that question's been bothering me for 100 years. But all I can say is this: when you're a believer in God, the lack of human punishment is not as important as it would be otherwise, because Hashem will take care of it. And you can rest assured that people that do these things will have a Gehenna that, in fact, I might even argue, although I don't have a raya for this, that the sin is so horrendous that there's no earthly punishment that can give it an atonement. It is left to God in Gehenna. This kind of a reversal svara, that sometimes the lack of a punishment is not because it's less chomor, but maybe it's so chomor there is no kapara in earth. Now, I also want to point out another thing, which is very important, and that is the Rambam writes that Beis Din has the koach to take people who are dangerous and isolate them from society, not to punish them, but to protect other people from being victimized. So I would imagine if in the time of the Sanhedrin we had child molesters, even if they're not chayav misa, and even if there's no onesh, they could be arrested, they could be put away, they could be separated, because we recognize that the protective function and the punishment function are two different inyanim, and even when there's no punishment, there would still be the protection of society. Yeah.
Quick follow-up. That being said, homosexuality, we see it's a sin, we see it's a very bad thing, but how should we act towards people in general and the Asians in particular?
Well, here's the thing. In an environment where homosexuality is treated as totally okay, an alternative lifestyle, and the like, and people gravitate to it, and I think we would admit that people may have genetic, I'm not going to say it has to be that way, but there are genetic tendencies or propensities. So I think we have to separate the sin from the sinner, meaning the act is wrong and the act is very bad. But I still should have compassion, respect for an individual that's struggling with this. So I'm not interested in denouncing homosexuals from the from the bima or whatever it is. And in fact, I would encourage a person with same-sex attraction to at least keep whatever mitzvahs they can keep. Meaning, okay, you're gay, okay, you can still put on tefillin, you can still daven, you can still keep Shabbos, etc. Meaning, the attitude shouldn't be, oh, you're such a rasha, forget about you. You encourage a person to do whatever they're able to do. Now, whether one could work on changing orientation is an enormously controversial issue. I don't want to get into that. A certain amount of change is possible, although the rates of success, are not fantastic, but, 30%, 40%, and the like. And I actually work with some psychologists here in Yerushalayim who do believe strongly in conversion therapies. In the United States, conversion therapies are very controversial, and there are some states that have passed laws. I think New Jersey actually has a law that it is against the law to provide conversion therapies for homosexuals, even if the homosexual wants it and requests it. We don't allow the doctor, the psychiatrist, to provide it. That's a little strange, but nevertheless, that's how shakua we are, or society is in that Tumah. But that's a separate issue, and that's a difficult issue. But whether you're working on changing the orientation or not changing the orientation, the person should be encouraged to do whatever mitzvot they're able to do. The Chavis HaLevavos says there is no such thing as a mitzvah that's so small that it doesn't count. Right? Even the guy, let me give you another example. A guy is a Machal Shabbos. Okay? He's going to go to the movies. He's going to go to a nightclub. But I can still tell him, before you go, why don't you make Kiddush? Now, you might say, that's so ridiculous. Guy's going to make Kiddush and then go to then drive to a nightclub? Yeah, what does one have to do with the other? Kiddush is a mitzvah. You make Kiddush. You acknowledge that this is Shabbos. This is a holy day. The fact that you break Shabbos, that's a problem. But still, they tell the story when the Vilna Gaon was in prison. Wow. I threw out that line. Why was the Vilna Gaon in prison? Okay. Just threw out the line. Yeah, the Vilna Gaon spent some time in jail because when he was younger, he was going into Gullus. He put himself in Gullus as a kapara. He was wandering through different countries. And in Europe in those days, a Jew had to have papers and all sorts of identification. He didn't have it. He was thrown in prison, etc. So he was sharing a cell with another Jew who was there for murder. Now, which is unusual. Yidden are not murderers. Yidden can sometimes evade taxes. Jews tend to be white-collar criminals, not murder. So there was water in the cell, and the Vilna Gaon was going to wash his hands for hamotzi. And he noticed that the Rotseach just started eating bread without washing his hands. So the Vilna Gaon said to him, Netilas Yadayim, what's going on? So the person started laughing at him. He was a big, broad guy. And he shows his hand. See these hands? These hands have choked people. These hands have murdered people. You think Hashem wants these hands to be washed before hamotzi? And the Vilna Gaon said, what does one have to do with the other? Yeah, you're a Rotseach, you're in big trouble for that one. But you think a Rotseach is patur from the Netilas Yadayim? Says, a Rotseach has to do Netilas Yadayim too. And that's a really good insight, because that tells a person, just because I'm doing one sin, as severe as it is, doesn't mean I shouldn't try to do as many mitzvahs as I can. And I want to point out that you have to have a lot of rachamim for a gay person who wants to be frum, because they're struggling under a real difficult nisayon. It's very easy for a heterosexual person to look at a gay person and say, what type of Russia you are. But Pirkei Avos says, do not judge a person until you're in their shoes. Well, it doesn't say, actually, until you come to their place. In English, we say, until you're in their shoes. So how do we know? Are we such tzaddikim? If we had those attractions, are we so sure that we would successfully surmount them? Don't know. So homosexuality is wrong and it's usser, and it's very chomor. But we have to have rachamim for the people that are struggling with it. And we can't look down at them, we can't disparage them, because they're going through a real tough nisayon, and it's important to have rachamim for people that are struggling. Yeah?
What's the significance of wearing D'Rabbeinu Tam tefillin when you get married?
Yeah, so the machlokas, this is one of the most difficult machlokim to understand, how on earth there could be a machlokas. I mean, tefillin have been around, at least from Matan Torah, and the Emes says even in Mitzrayim there was tefillin. And tefillin has 4 parshios in it. Shema v'hayam shemoa, Kadesh v'haya ki yaviyacha. And these are doraisa in the tefillin shel rosh. There are 4 compartments. Tefillin shel yad, it's written in one piece of cloth, only one compartment, but 4 parshios. The machlokes Rashi and Tosfos is, what is the order of the parshios? Do you follow the order of the Torah, or do you follow a different order, etc.? Now the halacha is like Rashi. Rebbeinu Tam is considered to be a chumrah. The Shulchan Aruch says that it's a midas chasidus, that a person that is a chassid, this doesn't mean a chassid, that means a pious person, should wear Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin, an average person not. On the other hand, Hasidim are very machar in Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin. It's interesting that the Gra himself did not wear Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin. And Rav Chaim Voloshener asked his Rebbe, "No, Rebbe, you're so medayek in all mitzvahs. Why didn't you wear Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin?" So the Vilna Gaon said, and only the Vilna Gaon would know this, if you want me to be Yotzei every shita about tefillin, I would have to wear 64 pairs of tefillin. It's not just Rashi versus Rebbeinu Tam. There are like a million other shitas. So he says, so why should I do Rebbeinu Tam and not do the other 63 different options? Now, so even among Hasidim, though, you are correct, many are noeg not to wear Rebbeinu Tam until they get married. And the reason for that is that they consider marriage to be a higher level of Kedusha. And they feel that since the Iker Hadin is like Rashi, and Rebbeinu Tam is a Chumrah, and the Shulchan Aruch says the Chumrah is appropriate only on a spiritually higher level, so they feel they reach that higher level of Kedusha when they're married. Because until they're married, they have sexual thoughts that are not connected to their wife. Once they're married, they feel they can direct those thoughts, and they're in a higher level of Kedusha. Now, there's a machlokas how to wear Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin. Among Ashkenazim, Hasidim who wear, they do it sequentially. They wear Rashi's tefillin during davening, and then after Chazaras HaShatz, they switch to Rebbeinu Tam. But Sfardim, who wear Rebbeinu Tam's, many Sfardim wear Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin, they wear 2 pairs at the same time. I don't know if you've ever seen it. They actually wear 2 roshes, 2 yads, and obviously the tefillin are smaller, so that both batim are going to be in the right location. So there are 2 different ways of doing Rebbeinu Tam's tefillin. Yeah.
What is the halachic source for working on one's middos? And is it doraisa or D'Rabbeinu?
That's a good question. What is the halachic source of working on one's middos, and is this a doraisa or a D'Rabbeinu? That's a very, very excellent question, actually. Where does the Torah say, work on your middos? So it really depends. First of all, there are certain concrete mitzvos that are middos-oriented mitzvos. For example, take a pasuk like, V'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha. You shall love your fellow Jew, like yourself. Lo sisne es achicha bilvavecha, do not hate. Lo sikaim v'lo sitor, do not take revenge or bear a grudge. So obviously, the mitzvah itself requires that you cultivate certain areas of character, right? That's one thing. Because that's what the mitzvah is. If the mitzvah is to love my fellow Jew, I got to cultivate that midah. But you are right that there are many middos in which there's no specific commandment. For example, where does the Torah say you're not allowed to get angry? Where does the Torah say you're not allowed to be greedy, so to speak? I mean, it's a mitzvah to give tzedakah, but, where does the Torah say I can't live a hedonistic lifestyle within the boundaries of halacha? So it's a very good question, but I'll give you 2 answers. One answer is that the Ramban has a famous fort on the verse Kedoshim Tiyu, be holy. And the Ramban asked the Kasha, what is that adding? The Torah gives me 612 other mitzvahs. And then it says, oh, by the way, I'm giving you another mitzvah, be a holy person. What does that mean? So the Ramban is a very famous Ramban, one of the most famous Rambans in the Chumash, Parshas Kedoshim, that the Torah is telling you, don't be a novel b'rshus HaTorah. He says it's possible that a person could be a disgusting person, living within the letter of the law. Kedoshim Tiyu says, don't be disgusting. So in a negative sense, the chiyuv of tikkun middos can come from the mitzvah of Kedoshim Tiyu. That's one thing. The other thing is this. This is a little bit of an extension. There is a mitzvah in the Torah to cleave unto HaKadosh Baruch Hu, l'davka bo. Now, the question is this. The Gemara itself asks, how can I cleave? How can I be davuk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So one answer is, attach yourself to Talmidei Chachamim, and you're close to God. But I would suggest another answer. Maybe this is a horror that occurs to me now. If there's a mitzvah to be close to God, and if, as Rambam says, I said before, that bad middos create mechitzos that separate you from God, then the mitzvah to be close to God is a chiyuv to get rid of those barriers. So this is actually a little bit of a chiddush, I'm saying. So it seems that tikkun hamiddos could be derived from the mitzvah of devekus b'Hashem, which middos ra'is prevent that devekus b'Hashem. You hear? So that might be a mechayev. That's a mitzvah in the Torah. By the way, there's a very famous vort from Rav Chaim Vital. Rav Chaim Vital, the Talmud of the Ari, actually asks the question, why doesn't the Torah give a mitzvah of midos tovos? Don't be angry, etc. He says, because the Torah is given to a human being. Midos raish are like an animal. In other words, midos raish are like the foundation of a building. The Torah is the building that I construct. Midos are not part of the building. Midos are the foundation of a building. And a building without a foundation is just going to collapse. So midos are even prior to the Torah. They're foundational. Rav Pindrus told me an interesting story once. There was some shaila, I guess it's still a shaila a little bit. The yeshiva has this bread slicer, right? You slice bread. So there was a shaila, are you allowed to use a non-electric bread slicer on Shabbos? Is it called uvda dechol? Some people say you shouldn't do it on Shabbos because it's too much of a weekday activity. So listen to this. So Rav Pindrus said, he went to Rebbe Yashiv and he said, I know that chatchila you shouldn't use it, but guys are ripping, the bread, and it's kind of this and that. So he said, Rebbe Yashiv was so shocked. He says, people are acting like animals. He says, that's worse than chilul Shabbos. He said that this lack of behaving with dignity and behaving with derech eretz, he says, that's worse. That goes beyond chilul Shabbos. It was so shocking to Rebbe Yashiv such a thing. So that's something to remember about the importance of middos. Yeah.
So there was a case, or I think it might be a case now, of a modern Orthodox synagogue bringing in a pastor or a missionary.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that. Yeah.
Is that so? Assuming that the rabbi did the right thing and he made sure that he's not going to be spreading Christianity and it's going to be just a motivational speech, is that allowed? And should that be condemned?
Well, I'm not in favor of condemning. I mean, I know who's doing the condemning, and it's not the greatest thing. And again, I don't want to question a decision that a Rav made, but I think it's a dangerous thing to bring missionaries into a Makom Kadosh, because it's different than a non-religious Jew. Let's imagine I would bring in a motivational speaker to my show who happened not to be religious. So he's speaking from a secular standpoint. All right, so a secular standpoint is not undermining the Torah. But someone who's a missionary, meaning he comes with a religious philosophy, then even if he's not openly talking about Yashka, there may be all sorts of insinuations. And not only that, but here's the other problem. Let's imagine the missionary guy gives a perfectly parv, beautiful speech. So somebody's sitting in the audience and says, wow, this guy's much better than the rabbi. so even if the speech is good, he might be attracting people to go to him. So, gee, I can get more from him than from my Rebbe here. So I think it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. Again, I can't second guess. I assume that the Rav had reasons for what he did, but it's not I don't think it's a wise thing to do, particularly when, unfortunately, many Jews do fall prey to Christianity. It's not a huge number of people, but missionary activity among Jews, does take some significant korbanos away from us. Yeah.
So, more of a historical question in science. It was diminished somewhat after the war, but within the Hasidic community, you see a lot of internal diversity in Haggadah and Hashkafa and just the teachings themselves of the Rebbe. I had heard once from somebody that the literature world itself was a lot more internally diverse before the war. After the war, okay, yeah, you have different yeshivas with different but it's mostly based on like Slovakia with a very kind Vester Limud and Limud. So how I guess I'm asking how has the literature world changed from pre-war Europe to reality?
Yeah, how the literature world changed. This is a very, very complicated question. I don't think there was a tremendous diversity in Litvische yeshivos. I think Litvische yeshivos are all coming from Rav Chaim, essentially, whether it's Mir, Slobodka, Kamenetz, Baranovich. They all come from Volozhin, because remember, the Litvische yeshiva world essentially started from one yeshiva and then they all spread. So Derech HaLimud would be the same. But you are correct that there was a great deal of diversity in terms of religious ideology and the like. In fact, to be frank, many Litvish Jews were not even Orthodox. Many women were not covering their hair. There were many maskilim, even if they were Shomer Shabbos, but they were involved in secular pursuits and the like. So you had Torah-only people, you had secular pursuits. We would call them today modern Orthodox, although they were called, it's interesting. Today we attack Haskalah like these were the biggest Rishayim like who ever lived. Maskilim. The truth of the matter is, a maskil was the equivalent of a modern Orthodox Jew today. We wouldn't have the same negativity as we sometimes assign to Haskalah. So the truth of the matter is, within the Orthodox world, there was a lot of diversity, and not everybody was Orthodox either. It was not a golden age. In fact, the Rav of Kovna was the major city of which Slobodka was a suburb. Slobodka was a suburb of Kovna. And the Rav of Kovna was a man, the Dvar Avram Shapiro, who died in the Holocaust. He died of cancer. He didn't die by Hitler, but he died during the Holocaust. And the Dvar Avram was a great gadol. He was a great gadol, a great posek. In fact, the Dvar Avram was I don't see it learned that much today, but when I was in yeshiva, it was one of the most popular svarim, and the yeshiva has it somewhere, the Dvar Avram. So I'm told that the Alter of Slobodka didn't want his Talmidim to schmooze in learning with the Dvar Avram, because he felt the Dvar Avram was too modern. Because in Kovna, and the Dvar Avram told the Alter of Slobodka, you can be so frum in your yeshiva because you're dealing with frum b'nei Torah. It says, I'm dealing with the city where half of the city is not religious, and I have to find ways of reaching them in different ways. So the Dvar Avram, who's really a bona fide gadol, was considered to be too modern for Slobodka. So you do have those different approaches. And in fact, the Litvish approach, anyway, what's happened today in Eretz Yisrael in particular, as Rav Yaakov said before, Litvaks have become more like Hasidim. For example, another example is the relationship with women. Hasidim, have this big, rigid separation. But in Lita, there could be mixed seating at weddings, things like that, and now it would never be done. But these are part of the influence of Hasidus on the Litvish Torah world. And also, there's also an idea that as the world gets more and more decadent, we have to get more and more strict. So it's kind of that way as well. But yeah, a lot of diversity has gone away. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to stop soon. Yeah.
What is exactly the element or essence of Judaism that's passed down through the mother to a child?
In other words, what is the magic connection of matrilineal descent that determines you?
Yeah, sure.
You know, obviously it's metaphysical and Kabbalistic. I can't fully explain it, but I think it is connected to the idea that before the child is born, the Malach teaches the child all of the Torah and imprints the Torah of Hashem on his soul. So since that's an experience that occurs in the womb of the mother, so if the child is in the womb of a non-Jewish woman, the child is not getting that particular spiritual hashpa'ah. How does a ger get it? So a ger would get it by going to the mikveh. The mikveh is like a womb. The mikveh itself resembles a womb. He gets it in the womb. He gets zapped. I mean, it's not in a conscious way. But I think that would be the mystical reason for the role of the mother. The practical reason of the role of the mother, this is just a practical reason, is we can always know who a mother is, but we don't always know who a father is. Because a woman could get pregnant from a lot of different people, and DNA is not always 100% reliable. So consequently, the definition of Judaism has to be based on that which can be ascertained with certainty, and not that which is doubtful. That would be the pragmatic reason. But I say the spiritual reason is the Malach teaching the child Torah. Okay, one more question? Or yeah.
What is, quote, bread of shame? Would taking money to learn Torah fall into that category? And what about a trust fund, or is that in the category of Yerusha?
Yeah, so bread of shame. Bread of shame is the idea that if a person got something that they didn't earn and they didn't work for, so there's a certain humiliation in getting it. So the answer is this. The term Nahama de Kisufa, which is Aramaic, the bread of humiliation, only applies to things that you get that you didn't work for. So if a person is supported for his learning of Torah, there are many, many questions that have to be discussed, and we don't have time now, it's at the end, but it's certainly not unearned. You've worked for, you're steiging, you're amal b'Torah, you're giving them a zechus, you're giving something back to the people that are supporting you. So although there may be many shilas about getting paid for learning, the Rambam was not in favor of it, I would not call that bread of shame, because learning is at least as hard of a job, or at least it should be at least as hard of a job, as working, it's working. If a person's doing it properly. If you're shirking off and just getting a kollel check, maybe so. But if a person is amel b'Torah, that's not na'ama de kisufa. Now, trust fund is a little different. Trust fund is magili, I'm getting money from daddy, etc. That may involve a certain amount of na'ama de kisufa, but once again, if al pi the din, you would be the yoresh of that when the father dies. So getting it earlier is you're just Yerusha. So we don't treat Yerusha as na'ama de kisufa, we treat Yerusha as what you're entitled to get. Okay, so I wouldn't use that vocabulary for that. As I say, getting money for learning has other issues in halacha and hashkafa, but it's not na'ama. It most definitely is not na'ama de kisufa. In fact, the truth of the matter is, the person who's doing the learning is doing a tremendous chesed for the people that are supporting them. There was a story, they tell a maisa, and we'll just end here, about an elderly couple that had been supporting their son-in-law and daughter to enable them to learn for many, 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 many years. And the son-in-law felt so bad. They were getting old. He wanted them to enjoy their retirement. He said, listen, I'm going to get a rabbanus. I'm going to get a job. I don't want you to do this anymore. And they said to him, how do you know we're doing you the favor? Maybe the zechus of our supporting you is why we're still alive. And the person said, no, listen, I just don't want to do it. I feel bad. I want you to enjoy the rest of your life. So he discontinued the support. He went and he got a job, and both of his in-laws died within 2 months. Because it actually was right. The zechus that kept them alive was their hachzakas Torah. And when they lost that zechus, Hashem said, it's time to go. Not that they were punished. I'm not suggesting they were punished, but derech hateva, they should have died. Hashem gave them arichus yamim because they were doing something good. They stopped doing something good, so Hashem now gives them their predetermined arichus. So that's why it's pedafka, not na'ama de kisufa. You're giving something back in your learning.